Okay, I'm recording now. I hope it doesn't.
Alrighty.
I'm Brooke. This is going.
Alrighty, so. Hey, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And do people come with like questions?
Yes.
Cool.
And hopefully we'll come up with
That's what I figured too.
Your kid's okay to still give like a short summary of what he did, just less of it.
Can you type in your email for the table?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are we gonna start off with the first one, with the precious knowledge and human masses, or are we just jumping into A?
I would like maybe we could start with the Vygotsky article and then do the
Because it's like the most important one.
yeah, and then do I thought the Proth. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Pidana, right? It's Pidana.
Hidana?
I think so.
Okay. They said it differently in my head. I was saying Praha, and I was like, they're saying it differently. But maybe do that one second or something. If you
Yeah.
seem like a good idea.
Yeah.
Cool. Who's A again? Sweet. Did you do Vygotsky one first?
Okay, so the question was drawing on examples from Cohen, build on your own life experiences to illustrate his ideas, explain how this broader social context plays out in the lives of the individuals. I didn't understand if it wanted me to like relate it to the Amazonian tribe or just like what he was saying from like my side. So I just said like something like just like the tribes reject anything that doesn't have to do with their culture, they just reject it, and some things that don't interest them too. Cubans are not born with knowledge, nor is knowledge independent of social context. One gains knowledge as one develops by social interaction with peers and adults, and knowledge is obtained through experiences, social situations, and just one's environment, and also that mistakes are fundamental to the child's development because you get to correct your mistakes and then you gain new knowledge. So I think that's what the question was asking.
Maybe we could talk about like examples that other people have of that in like their own life.
I know growing up it's just like seeing what other people were learning was like, do I have to learn this or do I need to type of thing. That's how I was growing up.
Yeah, I remember. I feel like a lot in high school. Like I remember a lot of people talking about like, when will I ever use this? And like they justify like not trying in their classes because like they were like, this information won't help me in my future. So I feel like if teachers could do a good job of like showing students like why that information is important and not just being like, this is important, but actually like explaining to students why, I feel like that could really help, just because I remember so many of like my friends in high school were like, this is stupid, I won't ever use this, so I'm not gonna do it.
It just kind of reminded me that with what you just brought up, like I don't remember most of the things I learned in high school, but I do remember my home mech class in 8th grade where they taught us how to like fill out a check and to do things like banking and stuff like that.
I needed that.
Yeah, and who knew that I would use that skill and fill out checks for like my grandpa and my dad and do things for them. Because like I just remember every time we go to the store, it's like they just hand me their card and like, here, you pay, and it's just awkward when they ask for your ID and I'm like, no, it's but like it's just things like that. It's like I remember that. So like that could apply. Like I gained that experience, which is really fun in class in school, and then I was able to use it in everyday things that I helped with my family financially. So
Yeah.
But everything else I just vaguely remember.
Yeah.
Other than like experiences with your friends or your teachers, but.
obtained through experience is so true, because I feel like the teachers that, like, I don't know, things that I learned, like, myself, like, I discovered it for myself, I remember those things, but when it's just, like, information I memorize, that, like, doesn't stick with me in the same way. Anyone else have thoughts on that one? No, I don't have thoughts. I can do B. So the question that I answered, well, so A and B was that one of Vygotsky's primary concepts is that all learning occurs in a social context. He writes that this occurring on multiple levels, from the level of interaction between people to that of broader society, and then like my section of that was explain the role social interaction plays in learning and identity development. Why does Vygotsky mean by learning occurring between people before coming internalized? Give examples of how social context and interaction play out in the classroom. So basically, like, Vygotsky talked about how the goal is to generate and lead development, which is the result of social learning through internalization of culture and social relationships. So that kind of relates to what I was talking about earlier. Like, in classrooms, we can't just tell kids information, but we have to relate that to what they already know, which, like, clearly, just from us talking earlier, like, that works better because that actually sticks with you. And also understanding, like, the importance of culture and parental upbringing in how a child learns, because if they're relating it to experiences they already know, and what you're teaching them in a class, like, doesn't line up at all with their upbringing and culture, like, that information isn't going to seem important to them, or, like, and they're not going to remember it because that doesn't have any meaning. And then, like, with learning occurring socially, like, spending time in groups and scaffolding with other students, like, maybe if you have, like, a more advanced student with a student that's struggling, like, they can help that student, so it doesn't always have to be you. And a lot of learning can happen in group environments and before the child, like, understands it themselves. So my first question was, like, what's an example you can think of how learning happens in a social context, like from your own life or from the film Precious Knowledge or any of the other stuff we looked at in this class?
Just having a group to, like, the AVID class, like, they have their, that, in the Precious Knowledge, they have classes, what was the class?
What was the class called?
Yeah,
I don't remember. I just learned.
it's like they, nothing, something.
Yeah. I don't
Oh.
They're just having that group
Mhm.
where they can just be themselves, and that's how they learn.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like AVID helping me be better and helping me.
I think just in general, a lot of social interactions are for better or for worse are gonna help
Mhm.
you grow. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when you were that child that, like, you get assigned desk seats and you're always put next to, like, the really loud people or, like, the
Mhm.
troublemakers, and you're like, why is this working? What are you
Mhm.
thinking, teacher? And then, like, they have a whole plan behind it, like, oh, they're gonna interact and
Mm-hmm.
like bounce ideas off of each other, and so they're thinking socially, and at the same time you're like, okay then, but it does work in a way to some extent, and just to show that how the people around you affect your learning, and depending on how long you're around them too, depends the way that you yourself learn.
Mm-hmm.
And just adding on that, I mean, like you guys already said, that Vygotsky pretty much emphasizes culture, more of like a learning kind of like thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, where you come from is how you mind things, right? So for instance, when we Hispanics, I come from like a very poor family. So
Mhm.
probably I have different thoughts than someone that comes from a rich family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I probably value because we always struggled and stuff. I'm probably more patient. I probably value more of material things and not having material things, or having material things, than someone that always had material things. Doesn't mean that he probably thinks wrong or his thoughts are different. It's just our cultures, as well as like Mexicans, kind of influence us how to think and how we apply different things and how we act essentially in the classrooms. I don't know if that can connect, right? No?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because a lot of I seen a lot of like Hispanic culture, especially in the females. Like when the females are young, they tend to be really really shy. I don't know if if you guys seen that.
Yeah.
Right? They're really really shy because that's just how the culture is. Hispanic culture is really like it's, the female usually has different roles than the male, even though it shouldn't be like that. But it's like that. That's how culture is. That's how culture is, and as they grow, I mean, they learn that that's not always the right way to act. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, it just kind of makes me think like, so I'm the oldest, but I'm a girl, so I'm always held up responsible for getting the chores done. So my responsibility, like my parents wouldn't let me go out. I would have to get the chores done, but my brothers, they always played, they weren't meant to wash dishes. And so when I like started to like high school and then in college, I started seeing like, you know, like this whole thing about, you know, equal, like when you start your own family, you start seeing, you know, have it equal, have to 50-50, you both take responsibility for the chores and blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just like, I just remember like when with my roommates and how it's like that with like their parents, it's just like, it's so cool and you just kind of start learning things like that. And so it just kind of brings in on what you're doing, what you were saying is how you learn either better or for worse based on who your interactions are with and stuff like that. So it just, I don't know.
Kind of just connects.
Yeah, it just kind of all overlaps. Yeah.
So do you guys agree with Vygotsky that that's like the main focus of how a person learns and
That what's the main focus? Like culture?
Like
yeah,
through
culture and
experience and
experiences
culture and stuff like that. I mean, I feel like yes, because I feel like almost everything I've learned it's been through experience and interacting with others and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, and any class
Overall.
that I've like learned a lot from or retained the like I'm a big verbal processor, I talk a lot. But I like from group work and from talking with people, I've learned so much more than if it's like individually like just me on my
Reading.
own. Yeah, and like that works so much better for me, and I feel like in general people get so much more out of those classes when it's like they're working with a group and getting to like hear other perspectives and other ideas, because I think it makes you like better at realizing there's more than one solution to a problem. Because sometimes I'm like, this is how you solve it, and then like in my math class, like 382, it's like crazy. I'm like, oh, you did this like drastically differently than me, but it still works, and really like expands your thinking.
Yeah.
so I got a question for you guys again. So what do you think street smarts fall into? What category?
Street
Like street smart, you know, like I'm not talking about just specifically just street smart, but just like just knowing, like never being educated, but just being from like experiences, like Vygotsky is talking about.
It's just like a way of surviving.
Yeah. Be,
What do you mean by category?
like where, like does it fall into like Vygotski's theory or does it fall into something else? Because
I'd say it does
I
because
think it
it's
does,
still, I mean, obviously culture is a larger part than just the educational system and what you learn in school. Like, your family could teach you street smarts and you don't even know it because you know how to approach people. Like, so many girls that I know are like afraid, of course rape culture is a thing, but like afraid of going out by themselves at night. And from where I'm from, it's like, I'm safe, I'm okay, I can walk at 2 a.m. in the morning and like feel fine about it because I know where to go and what to avoid. And so like, if you refer to that as street smarts, then I got that from my friends, I got that from my family, I got that from just exposure of the area as well. And I think that all falls into the socialization that I've encountered, as well.
in your life is right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And I feel like, I don't know, kind of what I got from Vygotsky's thing is it's more like that your formal education should work with that street smart. So instead of them being like these two separate things, like you
Come
learn
together.
these skills and you learn these skills, it's like skills. It's like the what you're learning in a classroom should relate to those street smarts, and so you understand how it's applicable. So I feel like Vygotsky's thing is like that experience you have outside of the classroom and that knowledge you bring is important and valid, and that contributes to your learning in a classroom. It's not these two separate things that you're learning.
Okay, that makes sense. That actually answered another question I had.
And then the other question I had is like what you think this would look like in a classroom, and if like your classes growing up were modeled this way, like some of them were, if you could see that.
Experiences. Probably like in a science class, or sorry,
No, go for it.
like a science more based class, they usually do more experiments so you can like see it and experience it instead of just reading it off a book. Because I had a lot of science teachers be like, okay, here's a penny, you know, we're gonna drop some water, and the pennies, because the pennies like the way it's formed, you can keep on dropping little drops of water and it'll build up, so it won't spill. But if you just read it, you be like, oh, it's kind of dull, boring. But if you actually see, I know everybody was just trying to put as many dots as you can before it's spilled, and you actually get that fun experience while learning.
Like a hands-on.
Yeah. And you kind of just remember it better later on.
Yeah, my AP European history my senior year he did such a good job of making it like interactive in groups and stuff. Like we did things where we'd all get like assigned a person and we had to do research on them, and then we'd like have a tea party and like wear a costume and he'd like bring us tea and whatever. And I like totally didn't realize that I actually loved history until that class, and then I was suddenly like, history is my favorite subject. It's so interesting, but he made it like really interesting instead of just like, here's a bunch of dates, memorize them. So that was one where I can really see the difference between like doing more social learning versus like a more individual learning.
And on a lot of other subjects, it's also difficult to avoid ability grouping because like you can even see it from kindergarten. Every like kindergarten has their own little box of books, and depending on what level they are on, they have different books that are more advanced or less advanced. And then or the classroom has, and they'd like get called to the back and have a little reading group. And that is helpful in the sense that they're being challenged at their own pace, but also it's going into the section of like teaching where you're grouping off kids and saying like, this is your group and that's it, and that kind of goes against Vygotsky and his scaffolding and the zone of proximal development of how the peers interact and like push each other up. And the different levels in the group help to like come to new understandings as well. So that's difficult, but it's also, I can see how it's necessary at times.
Like I wonder if there's like, maybe this is a muddy question, I don't know, but like a time when it would be more appropriate for to have like groups based on ability, or maybe when it's more appropriate to have more like scaffolding and try to have all different levels within a group. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
Would you mind restating the question?
Like, okay, so you know we were talking about like with like the scaffolding thing, it's like, you know, you should have a more advanced student with a student that's struggling more, and they can help them get up to that level, and you want to work in that zone of proximal development because it should be just like slightly more challenging than what that student can do. And so like, when is it helpful to base groups like on like scaffolding and wanting all different levels, and when is it better to put people that are in a very similar ability level together? So like, if, for example, reading groups, like when should you put the advanced student with the student that's struggling more, and when is it better to put maybe like all the students that are struggling a little bit more and put them in a group and work with them on specific things?
Oh, okay. See. Can't help you with that.
Yeah.
But good question.
Very good question.
Maybe there isn't like one clear answer as
Sure,
well.
why
It'd
not?
probably be more like a 50-50 split, because if the learning takes place as it's supposed to according to Vygotsky, and we're like advancing, then the separate groups are gonna change up as well. And as they change, the students are gonna like change groups and change abilities, and then there should be a constant pull. But also there's just times where students take forever, and it's not anything that like teachers should feel bad about or that we should push them towards, but we just need to understand their pace and the time that it takes for them to advance as well.
You said there's no clear answer.
Yeah.
And it's a muddy question. So funny. Yeah, but those were my things on Vygotsky. If anyone wants more things on that.
Okay, so for my section on Vygotsky, it had to do with how language plays a large role in learning, and how language is influenced by the experiences that we have ourselves. And so it asks like, what are some examples as to how And I think Vygotsky was basically like the way you talk influences the way you think, and the way you think influences the way you talk, and it's just interconnected. And it's also based off of social experiences, because I think that's a big one, because no one talks the same way to every single person they know. Like, depending on who you're with, you can code switch, and then it's just like, you're a million different people. And I think that's interesting also, like, depending on your experience within an experience, that'll change how your language interacts with others. And so, I thought this post was interesting, because it wasn't like, here's post one, here's the first article, here's the second article, but I had to read the second article before I could answer the first article, and I was like, okay, that works.
Yeah.
And so, when it comes to the tribe, it said in the article that they like continue to be one of the few tribes that only speaks their language and like refuses to adapt to the other. I'm pretty sure they're like near Brazil, to Portuguese in order to like remain within their culture and preserve it. And so, the fact that that's their case, they probably think so much different than any other people. Like time must be completely different.
And the fact they had the number system that was, because have you guys taken 381 for math yet?
No.
Okay, so you like create your own number system, because they're like, on this planet, I can't remember what it's called, the people's counting system is like 1, 2, 3, 4, many, 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 many. And I was like, well, everybody has to have a number system, so like we had to create one. And then the fact that they have 1, 2, and many? How do you do anything? That blew my mind. And how that like really affected their ability to like work with quantities greater than 3. I think that like really shows like how important language is and like how we think, because since they don't have language for that, they don't think about those quantities the same way we do, and like with the river and all that stuff too. Like I can't remember what it was about the river, but it's like by the river, whatever.
There's a beach by the river, but you don't even mention the river because you can't see it, it's not there, it doesn't matter. We are just talking about the beach right now, and so that's it. You'd only say it's at the beach, and that would be your sentence, and not the beach by the river, by the tree, blah blah blah.
That language was so interesting to me, it was blowing my mind.
So I guess I could ask the one question for y'all. How is your language influenced by your lived experiences?
Like how, like can you give
Like how do the experience that you've had like in your background, for our case it might even be like, how does it influence how you speak to others, or what language you even speak to others at times, or like just in general, how does who you are affect the way you speak to people? Yeah.
Kind of like when you talk to babies, you just kind of babble to them, but then when it comes to like a professor or someone high above, you're just trying to be like, have that articulate. Yeah, like sound smart. Trying to sound smart, so.
Do you think that's like, I know everyone does it, but do you think like in some weird world it should be that we speak to everyone the same, or would that just make a lot of trouble? Because I can see that having like negative effects as well. But I guess, sorry I'm talking a lot, but it just once again reflects off of culture and what's deemed acceptable and what's not, and in which areas you're allowed to say things.
Yeah. I just can't help but think like without like my culture and how I speak. So yeah, in most Hispanic you have the tú and the usted. And the tú is typically people that are your age, younger. Even to my parents, I sometimes refer them as usted. Uncles, and it, like here, I don't know, it's different. It's hard to explain
informal,
it. Yeah.
I remember learning that there's also like formal and informal in French, and my French teacher was like, no, if you ever use the formal to your parents, you'd be a little weird. And I'm like, I couldn't do that to my parents in Spanish. Yeah.
And like I remember in some parts, I don't know if it was in Spain or America or in both, but like you're supposed to if you get to know someone really well, you're supposed to ask them permission if you could reference them in the informal way.
Oh.
If not, you have to. It always has to be formal. So I know in some parts you have to do that. I've never done that before, but I read about it in some of my Spanish book that.
Like even if it's someone like your age, or then you have to ask, or
I
is it?
think it's just someone you get to know really well. Like
Okay.
like maybe if someone your age and you just met them, maybe you could reference them as formal, but I don't know.
Okay.
It's different for country, culture, whatever.
That makes sense.
But I thought it was interesting reading that about like language.
Yeah.
I was gonna think about that, like your question. Who's in 431 too? Is everyone here in that one?
No, which one?
ELL 431.
This is
It's
Oh,
42.
432. Sorry, I got them mixed up. 432. Is everyone in that? Okay, so we watched this video, like, it was a TED Talk about, like, your language affecting how you, like, save money. And so it was, like, Chinese, they said, like, Chinese versus English. And, like, English, you know, you have, like, future tense of a verb, so the future feels, like, really distant. Whereas in, like, Chinese, like, you don't change the tense of the verb, so it's, like, the future and the present are, like, more related. I'm not explaining this, but they're more, like, related, like, in how you're speaking, because you're using the same word for them. And then, like, all countries that use that kind of language, where, like, the future and the present are, like, you use the same word for them, and you don't, like, change the verb, they, like, save more money than countries that speak, like, English and languages like English, where, like, you refer to the future differently. And so it's, like, they really think that even, like, how we use, like, how we refer to the future, like, affects, like, how we save money and how we think about it, because we think of it as this separate thing, and we want, like, pleasant stuff right now, so we save money right now and don't save it for later. But like, where they speak a language that the future, like, doesn't feel like this far off thing, like, it feels more like the present, it's easier to save money. So I thought that was, like, a good example of, like, how it influences, like, literally they think that our language influences, like, how we spend our money. I posted the link to it, so if you're interested in my thing, I posted it. It was kind of interesting.
It just reminds me of like how rappers spend all this money and then just like there's like this meme where saying Bill Gates just buys like regular t-shirts and whatnot, and it's like this is how you stay rich. I was like, I see it. It's like they just spend money and they're like they just keep it like it's just material things.
Yeah.
Didn't it say that this tribe itself also like only had enough food for a few days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I wonder if their language could have any influence on that. Or
Yeah, because it said they, like, lived in the
in
present.
the present, yeah.
Because they also didn't have any, like, human, like story of human origin, because they don't think in the past and they don't think about, like, they live in the present. That's crazy that it, like, affects it so much.
What was the tribe's name?
The how did we say it's the Praha, but how did we say it?
Praha?
Dana, right?
It has the thing on the.
It's in the arm.
Pidahan.
Pidahan.
Pidahan. There we go. That's the name. Pidahan.
Right.
Pidahan.
Pidahan. That's right. And the language sounded really cool too. Like, I was, like, listening to that clip, I was like, whoa. In fact, they can, like, sing stuff and people know what they're saying. That's good.
Alright, so my part was pretty much talking about the ZPD, which is the Zone of Proximity Development. I don't know if that's the name. It's the notion which states, like, also just states how the difference between a student learning while being guided by someone versus a student learning not being guided and on their own, and the different difficulties and the struggles each of them, you know. Obviously the student that has no guidance there's a lot of struggling, and they tend to miss a lot of important detail, where like the student that's being guided by an educator, a teacher, or someone, a mentor, or a father, or any kind of figure like that, kind of gets the extra boost and kind of learns it faster and better pace. So it just talks about how like Legacy just talks about how that's important to have in the classroom, and while you're teaching these kids, to have somebody like that, you know, a figure, someone not only like not only implying that, oh, he's a teacher, but like actually get in there as an educator and actually help them, you know, get to the final steps. Not, you know, pick them up and get them, but like actually kind of just give them like little hints, like, you know, give little bread crumbs, and, you know, not the whole bread. And so that's pretty much it, and the differences between both. My question to you guys is, what's some examples of this, like played in a classroom, that a teacher can use without giving up the answer, but actually helping the student learn through the whole process? What can be some examples? Like you as future educators, what will you guys do?
I think like a lot of that would be asking open-ended questions, not closed-ended questions, because it gives the chance for like the student to explain their thinking instead of like just answering like a yes or no question. Actually I'm gonna explain their thinking. And then I don't know, like when I did my practicum in 3rd grade, like the teacher, before she like let them do the math problems on their own, she taught them like 6 different ways that they could solve the subtraction problem, and then they had to pick 2, and they had to solve each problem using 2 methods, but they got to pick which one they wanted and the one that worked for them. And then she had like harder, for like the kids that finished really fast and really understood it, she had like harder problems for them to move on to, but it wasn't like those were required. There was just like 3 problems they had to get done, and then there was additional ones. So I thought that was a really good example of like she gave them lots of different methods, so if one didn't work for them, instead of like needing to give them the answer, she could just like tell them like, oh, like how about, like what methods have you tried? Let's try another one, and give them another method. And like also scaffolding with different levels of problems. Oh, they're really loud in that room. I hope that's not on our.
Yeah, right.
What about you guys?
You guys have any ideas? Kind of thing that I was kind of thinking about was like leaving the educational like teacher thing figure, but actually like when you're trying to learn how to do something, like I don't know, play an instrument, and you're just like reading like the music notes, and it's super hard, but like you go on YouTube and people are teaching you like step by step, like tutorials how to play like instrument, and you get it like that, or like cooking and stuff. Like I don't know if you guys read recipes, but it's kind of typical. And then when you just see them, like, oh, this is simple. You should just cut it like this and just drop it in there. Okay. And that's it.
I think if she kind of summed up what I was thinking about, because I want to teach math, and I feel like just thinking back to my sister, she's a 5th grader, but like sometimes she calls me for homework or help for homework. My bad, I can't put my words together. And then so I help her, and I find myself teaching or telling her like a method that I was taught when I was in elementary school how to solve it, but the method that her teacher is using is really different, and she thinks that because that's the way her teacher is teaching that method, that's how she has to do it. And so she gets frustrated because it's probably not the method that she is comfortable with using to solve that math problem. So I really liked, it's just brought up like, you know, the teacher that you're talking about, 6 different ways that you could solve the problem, and then just, you know, finding out which one best works for you. I think it just made me think of what you said.
An example that the article, you say, or the use, it talked about how like a teacher also serves as like guiding the students and to solve problems easier, more better way. There was a huge assignment, and the teacher kind of like told the students to like think about it differently. Don't try to tackle it as one big assignment, but like separate, like 10 little assignments, and finish one by one, checking out like a little checklist, and then at the end the students completed the big, like to them it was just like, oh, this is simple. oh, this is simple, and it's just like 1 out of 10 and 2 out of 10. And then, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, totally.
Right? Just like with any math problem, there's a lot of steps, and if you just try to do everything at once, you're gonna get. But if you just do like, yeah, you're just like, oh, well, this is just this, and this is.
Yeah, like for example, I'm taking Math 341 right now, and there's a lot of formulas, but the way that our professor, what I think is interesting is that he helps us, he teaches like what the formula would look like and how we use it to solve this problem, but he wants us to think about it in ways that we could use our intuition or common sense, especially probability. Like you don't have to use an equation to know what is the probability of getting a blue marble from a bag if you have one blue and one red. Like that's what I thought it was really cool, is that you could use this method, but if you think about it this way and step by step, it may be easier, and you may not even have to use the formula. You're probably using it without even knowing that you are, and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty cool.
Well,
For
like,
math.
in all the 380 series, I love them because it's really different than how you're taught math. It's like they aren't teaching the formula first. It's like basically the kids like discover the formula on their own.
Right,
Like you would figure out eventually, like if you did enough of those where you were like thinking about it, like not systematically, but like actually like conceptually, eventually you would figure out there was like a formula kind of thing, but it actually makes sense to you and you know why it works. Like, sounds like
That's
the model.
that's like the method that my professor was using.
Yeah, and you'll like the 380 series if you like that because it's cool.
We're like on 36, so we still gotta talk about other things, right?
I still haven't gone.
Yeah, so.
Do you have any more questions?
No, let's see.
You're up at the top, right?
Yeah. So what I noticed about these questions is that some that you were able probably to get directly from like the text and stuff, but I felt like some were where you have to kind of think deeper and just kind of make connections to the text and have your own answers. So so I'm just gonna read the question out to you and then hopefully know. So what was Vygotsky believed that people are socialized in many different ways, school just being one of those ways. So we had already talked about school, your culture, your family, friends, etc., etc. How might the status of the current U.S. educational system, one's citizenship or documentation status, and language learning in schools be interconnected? How might this type of socialization affect access to opportunities and barriers to certain opportunities in other U.S. contexts? So I was a bit confused throughout the article as I was reading it, because there was the part where it's like, to understand this theory or whatsoever, you have to first understand this. And one of the things was Marxism, and so I did not know what that was. So I had to do a lot of, Google search and stuff like that. But I feel like the way that I approached this question, I was just kind of talking about, the U.S. educational system, it may be, I don't know, if I like to think of it as like maybe the Constitution or something. I'm just thinking of it like this just, packet of paper. But it was, if it was made, probably originally was made by like people that are part of the dominant culture, that it was probably made for people that English was their first language and people that were born here. So, like for citizens, stuff like that. So it was meant for like, I feel like, so that's the approach that I took. That, okay, so when it was made, it was made for this group of people, for the students. And so then I just kind of talked about how that could be an issue for like students of color and things like that, and how citizenship and documentation could also play, because I know like the education system could also vary from state to state because there's different policies, there's different programs, there's a lot of different stuff, and how that could play a role, because in anyone could, I guess, get a public education, but once it gets into like higher education, you have to be a citizen, or you have to have like a residence card and whatsoever. So I talked about that, and then language as well. So like, there's millions of people that English was not their first language, and just that language barrier that we have talked about in the previous sessions as well, and how that could be conflicting, because you have to learn the language and the content and whatsoever. and then adapting to the new culture is just too much. And so I just kind of went back and forth on how these things could be interconnected and stuff like that. And so, and of course, then that also kind of relates to how it affects access to opportunities and barriers to certain opportunities. So that just kind of also leads back to like things that we talked about in the past and things that you could have access to, like a group of students, like for those like families that are, you know, they have undocumented parents, they probably don't qualify for food stamps, and then it's different for families that, you know, that are citizens that do qualify, and one has maybe more trouble, you know, just things like that. But yeah, that was what I talked about for that as well. And I did mention, so one of the questions was like, also what kind of theory, and I thought the theory that applied to what I was talking about was the consensus theory, which brought back to, so like, so a definition, so the consensus theory is like a social theory, and so the definition that I found, or the way I thought it was like a particular political or economic system is a fair system, and the social change should take place within the social institutions provided by it. So that just kind of brings me back to the whole thing of like how the U.S. educational system is made. Like it's, you know, it's well written by people from dominant culture, from people that, you know, that have citizenship here and English was their first language and stuff like that. It just, so that's the theory that I connected it with, and how if you don't respect the rules, then you're seen as deviants, and so like, and then so a lot of people struggle within the system because they don't know the language, they don't have the status that they need, and all that sorts of stuff. So that's why I connected it with that theory for that question. But yes, it was a lot.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions I didn't have any questions till after, you know, I had done all the Google research on what, you know, Marxism was and all that kind of stuff, but yeah.
I guess like my thoughts when you were sharing, like, I feel like our education system so doesn't fit with today's like society, because it's like you're talking about like it was written by dominant culture, and like the culture has changed a whole lot, and like also it was our like education system was set up for when we were in like factories and everything, we're like on a bell schedule and all that stuff, is because when it was made that was like preparing people for the workforce. But now that's not what the workforce needs. It needs like critical thinkers. Like in math class we were talking about how we don't like, they don't like encourage like doing like time test multiplication, all that stuff anymore, because we don't need people that can like do math fast, because if we need math done fast we have computers, but we need people that are like critical thinkers and can think through problems. So like our classrooms right now aren't set up to like set people up for success in like more ways than one. It's like the whole system itself, and then also it's totally geared to privilege like a certain group of people, even though a lot of our country is not that anymore.
And like you were saying, like documentation and status definitely plays into it as well. There's a place called Sterling Meadows that has the homework club, and I remember them being like, oh yeah, it's awesome, and it always has been awesome, it's really nice, but they're like, and recently all our high school graduation rates have gone up so much and all of this, and one question that my 310 professor posed to me was like, is it the homework club itself, or is it the DREAM Act that currently just passed and all those high school students actually have a chance of going to college now, so now they actually want to graduate from high school? And I'm like, yeah, that's definitely a factor in there as well.
What's the DREAM?
It allowed a lot of young students like access to college through having like a social security number, or also a work permit for 2 years.
Yeah, so like my cousin, she's a freshman here at Western, but she was born in Mexico, so she's part of the DREAM Act, and she got a social security and she has a residence card.
Oh, okay.
And that's why she could.
That's
For
really
school.
Really
Yeah, for
aimed
school.
towards
Yeah.
That's really cool.
college students.
And now they can get FAFSA. Well,
Mhm.
that's like
It's like WASPA.
WAFSA.
WASPA.
WASPA.
What is that?
WASPA, something like that.
Does the W stand for wash?
Is it
Washington.
more
Okay, so it's
Washington?
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like FAFSA, but a little bit different.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Talk about the third question
Yeah, I don't know if we have time to get through many.
real
of them.
quick. Cause
You could like just, if anyone has any questions they really want to ask, if you came up with questions, maybe they could share those.
Well, I thought this article was awesome. I did not understand all the linguistic
Yeah.
terminology, but luckily my suite mate is a linguistic major, so I just asked her and she'd be like, yeah, it's this, this, and this. I'm like, okay, I don't need to know. I just need a basic. But I thought it was really cool. It was so interesting with the one, too many, and then the staying in the present,
Mhm.
and all of the, and how
they teach their
and the Chomsky theory
Yeah.
as well. Like I've heard of the Chomsky theory through my suite mate, but I didn't think it was this huge, and how like Everett, you know, just like how he used to be like he used to go with it, but with what he's learned now he's like, no, I'm not so sure now, and stuff like that. So just interesting. I thought that's interesting too.
Yeah. What it made me think about is thinking about how much language impacts how we think about things, and the impact that that could also have on like ELL students, just because if they speak a language that makes them like think differently than English would, like, so even if like they learn English and they communicate well in English, like the impact that would have on their wow, losing my voice, on their thinking, and like yeah, I don't know how to finish that sentence, but does that make sense?
makes total sense.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I have to get to a roommate now.
Yeah,
though,
me too.
So
I mean, not that, but I gotta.
I figured.
I was
You
like,
have to be somewhere.
yeah.
But I love the last article. That was interesting.
Okay, so so just a reminder, also not to do the poll latest tomorrow, and then take a look at the rough draft and think of the things that you're interested in.
You're gonna send it through email, right?
Yeah,
All right.
it'll
sounds
be
good.
through email.
I'll put the muddy questions on the discussion.
Sweet,
If you guys
sweet,
want to
thank
look at
you.
it, like edit them and do better ones.
If you comment on Orlando's with an edited one, I'll just copy and paste yours when I post the video.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
So if you want to edit them, just put that underneath and I'll pick like the
Because I know
final.
on the last